Get in the know. Non-stop Vikings talk. It's Purple Daily on Score North and ScoreNorth.com.
Football.
It's Judd, it's Chip Scoggins, who joins us every other week, of course, Star Tribune sports columnist Ross Brendel in for Declan Goff, who's taking some time off. So here we are talking about Chip Scoggins, Vikings 49ers on Monday night. Give me your overall sort of state of the Vikings, your feeling right now, coming off a win at Chicago in one of the worst football games I have ever watched. Now, I heard you were at the Wisconsin-Iowa game, so you beat me, but those are two of the worst football games probably ever played.
Could you imagine if I had to do that doubleheader, Wisconsin-Iowa on Saturday, then that Vikings-Bears game on Sunday? That would have been
I'm sure surprised torturous. You didn't, being you. I'm surprised you didn't insist on driving to Chicago and putting yourself through that torture.
Yeah, I didn't come out of that Vikings game feeling any better about the Vikings. That's what's Judd, what's happened to their offense, man? Like,
Jefferson's
they can't run
out,
the ball, and JJ's out, and
Hawk still drops passes. KJ drops passes. The run game is non-existent, and they won't. And they keep treating. And I mean, this is my biggest O'Connell surprise so far. It's the treatment of Alexander Mattison as if he's Dalvin Cook in his prime. Because I can't, there's nowhere else that I blame that. It's not like, well, that's Cousins' fault too. But all of those things, I think, factor into an offense that can, you know what they are? They're the Vikings. They're the Childress teams that we covered that can move the ball between the 20s just fine. You get into the red zone and it's a different ball game. Yeah.
And you're starting to wonder the longer this goes, if they just completely overestimated what Madison was going to give them in terms of being an efficient running game. We know how much the lost yardage and the 0 yard gains bugged O'Connell last year, but they're missing that explosiveness that Dalvin gave him, or the potential that he had. I mean, yes, he had a lot of runs that lost him yardage, but he also hit home runs, and they're just not getting that right now. And I don't know that they're going to get that. So they don't have. They're never going to be a high volume rushing team, I don't think, under O'Connell. But I think they're sitting 30 right now, right? They're one of two teams that don't have a rushing touchdown.
That's incredible.
They're not getting any explosives out of it. And it's putting way, way too much pressure on the passing game to produce. And now you're doing it without Jefferson and Hawkinson. He's not what I thought he was going to be this year after signing that contract. I thought he was going to be just the balls that are banging off his hands on those contested or difficult catches is like he's not making them. So if you want positives that I took away from that game, I thought Danielle Hunter was the best player on the field for him. I know Jordan Hicks had the splash plays, but I thought Danielle really impacted that game. So I think he's, looking like Danielle of old. And the defense is making plays, but they're just not putting together a complete game. And I don't know that they have that in them. Maybe they do, but it's just they're still sloppy. It's still just like not a lot there, as we used to always say.
And their 2 wins have come against a combined 2 teams that are 1-11. And so that's the problem too, is like the Bears are like, you're watching that game and correctly thinking they can't really lose this game. Right. And of course they didn't. Now they did give it the old college try late in the game, but but we still haven't seen, it's like the Kansas City game, perfect example of a game that they could have won. I mean, if Madison catches that stupid screen pass, he's still going, he scores a touchdown. He's still going now. It was perfectly blocked up. It was a perfect pass. There's no one to blame but him. It's so interesting too, Chipper, because I feel in some ways that when you ask me offensively, what's wrong? I feel in some ways like O'Connell has taken a step backwards. And I don't know if it's because he's afraid. I don't know if it's because the synergy with Kirk is not there like it was. But when I look at what I feel to be as a real lack of creativity, and this included when Jefferson was playing. But the problems, third down against Chicago, you're what, 2 of 13?
2 of 13, yeah.
That's not excusable.
Well, and the other thing is, Judd, go back to last year when they started so well, their scripted plays, and then they kind of hit a lull after that. That became a narrative, like they were really good on. How many points do they have in the first quarters of this year? I mean, they're starting slow. They're not coming out of the gates like we're used to seeing them do. And it's funny because we thought, okay, year 2 in the system, this thing's going to look even better, and it's gone the other way. And I think part of that is just obviously the turnovers have taken a lot of points off the board for them, but independent of that, I mean, not being able to run the ball, I think, is really impacting what they can do in terms of setting things up, making the defense honor that. It's just, I mean, they're basically getting nothing out of that right now.
Which brings to mind one question: where is Cam Akers? He had one carry for 8 yards. He had 1 reception. But how much more do they need to see? And by the way, if you look PFF wise, the offensive line's actually playing pretty well. So you can't blame this all on the line. Everybody but Ingram actually has a pretty damn good grade, and Ingram is not nearly as the disaster he was a year ago. So, you went out. I thought that you went out and got Akers because Chandler, as far as his blocking went, was too raw. And so I assumed they didn't trust Tyson Chandler. So they're going to play Cam now, and it's going to be, at least somewhat of a split. But it hasn't been. And now my question is this: on Sunday, are they going to try and incorporate Wongwu, who's going to come back and return kicks? I'm assuming Chandler's going to be down, but is there anything that they're going to try to change differently to provide A, more looks, and B, just sort of a shot in the arm to a run game that is just, to your point, not effective?
Yeah, there might be some gadget plays in there, maybe 1 or 2 for him to try to get him on the edge and let him use his speed, but I don't know that the trust factor is real high with him right now with the coaching staff.
I agree with you on that.
How this season has gone, so I don't know that we're going to see that other than returning kicks, but it's just so vanilla. And I mean, Cousins has a lot of yards early on, but he's not playing as well as he was last year, and some of that is drops. I mean, I would love to know where they rank in drops. And those can be tricky. Those can be tricky to count. Like, you count a tough catch a drop,
right?
Those
Phil
can be
found
subjective.
It's too high. They've got, I believe, KJ Osborne might be tied for last in the league in drops. Hawkinson's got a bunch. Now I don't know. Here's what's tough. I don't know what they consider a drop. So like, is the tipped KJ pass that was actually behind him at the 2 or 3 yard line, is that a drop? Because that's a tough catch as well.
Yeah, I mean, do they count if you get your hands on it? Is that a drop? Well, that's not really fair all the time either.
Right.
That can be subjective, but it does speak to they're not making difficult catches consistently, and so part of that's on Cousins to throw a better ball, but sometimes you just can't because of circumstance, and you need your guys to make difficult catches. So, yeah, I'd be, I wonder how much of this does O'Connell not having a running game that he can rely on impacting the way he calls the game.
It probably does, but my question off of that is, then why don't you change it? You know, why don't you try different things? It's not your line. It's not your line. And Ross says that the Vikings, to your question from before, are 29th in the league in first quarter points, and they're averaging just 1 point.
Yeah, I mean, if
you do the math, sorry to cut you off, Chip. I think they said on Sunday's game was the field goal may have been the first points they had on their first drive of the game all year against the Bears.
Which was great last year.
Well, that was who they were last year. I mean, he scored,
scripted plays, baby.
The scripted plays. So, it'll be interesting to see. Now, do we know yet? Have we heard? I mean, I know we're taping a few days in advance. Have we heard like status on Debo and McCaffrey yet? I mean, that might be game time. My hunch is, not haven't read too much on them yet. that they'll take the big picture approach with those guys and say, let's look at the long haul and not just one game. So you may face him without him, but the longer this goes, Judd, and you get closer to that trade deadline, it's going to be interesting to see what Kwesi does and how he handles this.
Yes. And among the things I never thought I'd say in 2023, but I'm about to say it, San Francisco's defense against the Vikings offense actually scares me more than San Francisco's offense against the Vikings defense, because the Vikings defense has really done its job. Like, for the most part. Now, they can't stop the run, and they do not have, for the love of God, find a defensive tackle who can stop the middle. But I'm more concerned because that Niners defense, one, is physical, and two, they're pretty damn good, Chipper. So I'm actually more concerned that the offense is going to remain out of sync playing them.
Yeah, I agree with you there, particularly if they have the personnel losses on, their main guys sitting out. San Francisco on offense. But yeah, I mean, it's a bad matchup. I think Niners are the most complete team in the NFL when they're healthy. I mean, they would be my Super Bowl pick. I just think they're and we saw it last year when they were here for that joint practice. It's like, man, that is a big physical team. Like, they are well constructed. You looked at that, you just walked away and said, that looks like a Super Bowl team right there, the way just physically they are and how deep they are. Yeah, I don't, and that was the big question. Like, what will the not having JJ, what's the impact on everyone else? Well, you're seeing it, right? Not only him catching the ball, but just the attention he takes on defense and guys committing to him, and now all that flows to someone else or other people, and they play you more. Addison's getting tougher coverages, and Hawkinson's getting, so it's the effect of not having him is just massive, and so I don't know if they have the firepower to kind of combat that, especially if these guys are going to keep dropping passes.
Oh yeah. Oh, then they're totally screwed. But I think what scares me too is, again, your lack of success offensively came against the Bears.
Yeah, I know.
Like, if that's like, if you can't do that against the Bears, and yes, Justin Jefferson's all world. We all think he's great. But when you're playing the Chicago Bears, who, from watching him, looks like they've cashed it in, and I guess I don't blame him at this point. Yeah. But what's San Francisco? Because I do think Flores and the defense, I think that they're going to come up with ways probably that can throw Purdy off a bit. Now, Shanahan will counter that eventually, but I'm just more concerned about, like, you were given the Chicago Bears a gift with Jefferson hurt, and a team that was last in the league, Chipper, in third down defense.
Yes.
And you couldn't convert 11 of 13.
Yeah. Yeah. They're 2 of 13, right? Yeah. Well, I do wonder, this will be up front, because go back to that playoff game, and I know the personnel changes, not the same personnel, but was it 2 years ago out in San Francisco, the playoff game where they 19. Just got absolutely beat up physically along both lines? Yeah. Yes. The second round game. I mean, that's as big a mismatch in the trenches as I've seen. I mean, they couldn't do anything.
2018, and if you remember, Chipper, the Niners at one point in the second half ran like 11 or 13 straight runs in a row. They just ran it right down the Vikings' throats.
Yeah. I was there for the game, and I remember, being in the locker room afterwards, and just there was nothing they could do to stop it, and they knew it, because they were just the difference in physicality in the trenches. So I want to see that's where, to me, where it'll as it is most games, but I think even more so when you face his opponent, that's where that game's going to be decided.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's what the same thing is what the Eagles did to the Vikings in week 2 this year, which was just take a series and ram it down the Vikings' throats, which they did brilliantly on that drive.
How much of that, Judd, too, is like because Flores, he likes line rush edges, he likes safeties, he likes, the speed. Well, teams are just going to counter and say, okay, you don't have enough big guys, big bodies inside, so we're just going to run the ball, and they just can't stop the run there.
So this might sound weird, but I was told this after the fact, Chipper, and it makes some sense. So if you recall, going into week 2 in Philadelphia, Marcus Davenport, who's out again now,
Yeah.
was active, and he was supposed to play a pretty big role on the defensive line. I think he played 4 plays,
4 snaps,
4 snaps, and that was it. And I really think, and yes, he's not the guy who's going to solve the problem of the run game against you. But in watching Davenport, the rare times he's healthy, he actually does provide a guy that allows you to move different guys inside and allows you. And I unfortunately, because I've seen enough now, like he's just never healthy. But unfortunately, I do think his loss is fairly substantial. Because Flores is not exactly dealing with a laundry list of great players already. And so that's my thing. I think Brian Flores probably schematically has done a great job. But I think there comes a point in time too, where you just don't have the talent. And I think that's the Vikings problem. They just defensively they're just not there.
That's it. Like it's like fixing that side was not a 1-year fix in terms of personnel. Like you just don't have enough, either cap space or draft picks or whatever. But it is like you talk about Davenport is like, that's the disappointing thing because like he made an impact. He makes an impact when he's on there. You see him.
Yes.
Like, and you wonder if that's going to affect Daniil now on the other side, not having him because there's just a drop off. I mean, there just is when he's not in there. So, I mean, I think I would like to see Flores, his defense, when they get the personnel where they want it to be. And because they have, I mean, it's obvious. You watch it. They're not where they need to be or where they want to be personnel wise. And so it'll be interesting to see, if he's still here in a couple of years, if they can add more talent there. But did you see, Judd, I was just before we started taping, did you see our old buddy Rick Spielman?
Yes.
Floating that team should be calling to try to get a trade for Daniil as the deadline approaches. I have to imagine there will be a lot of interest in him.
I think if you can get at the very least a conditional first round pick, that you make that trade, unless you have him signed to an extension before Halloween.
Yeah. There's been no indication that that's the way they want to go.
We've heard nothing on extensions.
Yeah, and I don't know that. Who knows where his if he just wants a fresh start somewhere. If he just he's doing what I thought he would do though when he signed that 1-year deal, have a big year and show that he's healthy and show other teams that he's still a high impact player on defense. But a few more losses, Judd, and this is going to be a regular theme around this team. Is like, okay, who's going, who's staying, who should be traded. I mean, that's the price you pay when you fall into this hole.
And in some ways, Chip, I think that they do have, if you look at the second half of the schedule, there is room to put together a run. But here's my thing. I think for the good of this franchise, if I'm Kwesi, you've got to be looking at what you can possibly get as far as draft picks go. Because here's your problem. Come March, Kirk Cousins can walk. Daniil Hunter can walk. You do not have, and if Hunter walks, and Davenport probably is not brought back because he can't stay healthy. Now you have no one who can rush the quarterback. The nose tackle, you don't have anyone who's really good inside. So I guess my thing is this: would you take a couple of years, including this one, of short-term pain to reset things? Because I hope Brian Flores is back. I think he's really good. I think he schemes up great game plans. All of that being said, at some point in time, if you don't have the talent, you don't have the talent. And if it was just a quarterback, which is a big thing to say, but if it was just quarterback, I'd be like, okay, maybe you can find somebody. I don't know, but it's not, Chipper. It's a lot of really hard to find positions. You can't, I can go find you a linebacker.
Yes.
I can't go find you a pass rusher.
That's it. I mean, that's the thing. It's like, that's the thing. It's like, okay, if you assume Daniil's not back, he's going to sign somewhere else. Well, you need somebody there. That's a premium position. Like you need edge rushers. When you watch other defenses and you see they have these massive, mountainous nose tackles that just clog up everything. They don't have that. They need that. So no, this is, would you take the short-term pain? You know what? They've been stuck in good but not great for a long time here. You know, and there's some satisfaction in that because you're never just a terrible team. You're getting a taste of the playoffs. You feel like you have you feel like you have a fighter's chance sometimes. But if you're being realistic, like, you know, even though they won a division and got in the playoffs, like, you knew that's not a model. Like, you can't be one of the worst defensive teams. So Kwesi has started the roster turnover. But it's complicated because, like, are they going to pick the right quarterback? They've already told us that Justin Jefferson is going to be, I don't know, have a voice in kind of decision makings or impact or input,
Yeah. And he's going to break the bank too, which is another thing too. You can't like if you say, you know what, Daniil's great, let's bring him back. At some point in time, I got to draw a line because Christian Darrisaw, Justin Jefferson, however you replace your quarterback, if it's not a rookie, right? So like at some point in time, yes, the cap goes up, but you're going to have to make decisions. And Justin Jefferson is probably going to be the highest paid non-quarterback in the league.
Yes. And, I mean, it's you just made Hawkinson the highest paid tight end in the league. And, like, you need him to be better than what he's been. Yes. Like, you need him to have a major impact when you're paying him that kind of money. And so, but here's the other thing, Judd. They got to draft better. They just do. I mean, you can't have drafts where you're not really getting anything out of them. I mean, that's a problem. When I was listening to Kevin O'Connell today, or earlier this week when he met with him, and I think Andrew Kramer from my paper asked him about Lewis Cine being a healthy scratch, and he said, I want to make sure I get it right, but didn't he basically say they're looking at him to be up this week to be a gunner?
Yeah, he might be a gunner. We're looking for it. I know.
Your first round pick, you're hoping he can be a gunner. I mean, that's a problem. So they need, not only the money stuff, but they need to hit on the draft and have some of these guys actually be integral good players for them.
That's a huge thing. And the quarterback doesn't scare me as much because I don't think it's going to have much to do with Kwesi. I think the quarterback is going to be O'Connell's pick. And if O'Connell gets that wrong, he's done. He's got, in my opinion, because both Kwesi and Kevin had 4-year contracts, you've got one big bite, and it's a big bite, but you got one big bite at that apple. If you're wrong, you're probably done. But yeah, like the 2022 draft is biting them in the ass because you don't have any suitable replacements. Now Booth did play more against the Bears, but what does that mean exactly?
Yeah,
I'm talking starting. I'm talking you hit on, and the other problem too is this work. It comes back as well. You took a safety. Yeah. One, you've got Metellus, 6th round pick, right? You've got Bynum, like a 4th round pick. Harrison Smith set there. You're set at safety, and you got a guy that can't play, and even if he could play, that's not what you take a 1st round pick with. So
yeah,
a lot of mistakes.
And there's Brian Asamoah. I mean, how much is he playing? A couple snaps here and there.
He finally got back in again on. I think somebody begged him to play Booth and Asamoah against the Bears because all of a sudden they mixed in a little bit more. It might be guys trying to save face.
Yeah, and I mean, because we thought, okay, this guy has to be, he needs to emerge as a full-time solid starter for him, and that it hasn't happened yet. So yeah, there's a lot to be skeptical about with this team and kind of where they're at right now. That's not to say, we've seen in the NFL things change quickly, and you're right that the schedule does ease up in the second half, but they just have to. Part of it, I feel like they've just kind of self-sabotaged themselves with the way.
Well, they have.
So that some of that's on them. But it's hard to feel optimistic about where they're at right now.
Absolutely.
And where they're going and what they have, the pieces that they have. I just, especially with Jefferson out.
Okay, Roscoe, Why should we be optimistic? We're jaded. The two of us are jaded. So you tell
We're
us
old.
why we should be.
We're old.
Yes.
No.
We're old. We've
Cranky.
seen a lot of bad football.
Guys, I'm with you. I have coined for other teams in town when the timing is right. I like to say be bad to get good. And I think that's kind of where the Vikings are at right now. What if you're going to rally and play well when the schedule softens up after, well, quote unquote, softens up after Kansas City? In my opinion, what is the point in finishing 7-10 or 8-9 and missing the playoffs? I'm not asking the players on the field to intentionally lose the games, but I'd rather be 5-12, 6-11, 4-13. Realistically, if you don't beat the San Francisco 49ers on Monday night, you're not going to the playoffs. Now, if you beat the 49ers and you get to 3-4, to a degree, okay, game on. But if you're 2-5, you're not going to overcome that. I just don't see you winning 6 in a row to get to 8-5 and feeling good about yourself. So I don't necessarily think that you guys are so jaded. I just think that that's an honest and open assessment about where this franchise is right now. And Judd, we've talked about this on Before I Die here in the Purple Daily podcast network. You're going to move on from Kirk Cousins very soon. What is the prism of very soon, or what is that time frame? I don't know, but logic tells you it's this offseason. So don't you kind of want to have the best draft pick and the most assets you can possibly have to make that happen, especially if you need to move up and get your guy? So I don't necessarily think you guys are jaded. I think it's just an honest, open assessment with where this team is. And guys, they haven't earned rah-rah. As you mentioned, you have 2 wins against teams that are combined 1-11, and you've scored 6 points in the first quarter all year. 6 points.
Ross is jaded. No, that's right. You know, it's funny when
we're Minnesota sports fans, right? We're all jaded.
Right. No, when, you know, it's funny when the season began, Judd. I was in the camp that I thought they would be at a point where Cousins would return, most likely after this year. I would have put it like 67%. Based on where they're at now, I just think they move on and draft a guy. At this point, unless something crazy changes the rest of the season, but if it keeps going this way and they're stumbling and they're not, you know, they're well out of it, I think it at that point, to me, then it's like, you know, turn the page and you're going to draft it.
Chip, for me, it's not necessarily even a dig or a massive rip on Cousins. His numbers this year are okay. It's more of just the reality of when this team is ready to compete again for a Super Bowl, he'll be pushing 40. He'll be in the back half of his 30s. So there's really no better time than right now to start investing and looking at what is next. And by the way, if you screw up what's next, you're bad enough to then again spin the wheel of quarterbacks 3-4 years down the road.
Well, if you screw that up,
be someone else.
O'Connell's history.
It'll be someone else
history. He can't.
But as a franchise, you can
Rick
do
Spielman. Rick was shown the door, in my opinion, because and he's basically talked about this on Sirius. He couldn't find one, and so I don't think there's going to be a lot of patience with a guy with a 4-year contract to be like, oh, we'll try again. The other thing too is it's very, very clear now that when Kirk didn't get the extension last March, Kirk said, okay, that's fine, that's cool, I'm going back to market. And we can talk all we want about how they love Minnesota and blah, blah, blah. He's going to get the highest bid he possibly can again. I mean, if there was a negotiating wing in Canton, Kirk Cousins is first ballot. He's one of the great negotiators of all time.
Yeah. And he, you know, he's not taking the hometown discount and all that. You know. And the one thing I will say, like I'll say, oh, you got to get that first or second pick to get that quarterback. There are a lot of really good quarterbacks in college football this year. Now, they're good quarterbacks for college football. That's for O'Connell and guys that are a lot smarter than me to decide, does it translate to the NFL? But when you look at them and you watch them, we all love Caleb Williams, you know. But there's more than just Caleb Williams and Drake May. I mean, there's a group of guys, quarterbacks this year that I think are going to go in the first round. I don't know how many it is, but I think it's going to be a handful. And I don't think you have to be 1 or 2 to get the guy.
How close is Drake May to Caleb, do you think?
I saw Drake May, you know, obviously in person against the Gophers. He's good. I mean, he's really, really good. I'd take him second. I could see him going number 2, you know. I just think he's that good. He's he had complete control of the game. Now it was the Gophers defense that's not very good.
I loved his arm. So
his arm, just everything. He had just complete control. He had 2 interceptions. One was when he got hit. Wasn't really his fault. The other one, maybe a bad read. The kid made a really nice play on it, but he's really good. Like, I like him a lot. So, and I just think I don't think teams are going to be scrambling to fight over 2 quarterbacks. I just don't. I think there's guys in this that are going to be available in the first round. It's just that's up to the evaluators. Like,
who's your third, Chipper?
Oh man, there's Penix. Michael Penix is fantastic. I think if you pick the Heisman today, he would be it. Bo Nix, kid at Florida State. Early on, I said keep an eye on my guy from Tennessee, but he's just the arm talent.
That's because he's hopeless.
He's way too
Homer.
Yeah, I know he's way too inconsistent. Huge arm,
but Kansas.
Yeah, I know.
Shirt today, hoodie.
But there's probably I don't know how many are going to go in the first round. I think a handful of them, but there's different different skill sets.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just whether you think my hunch is O'Connell will want a mobile quarterback based off who they like this past draft class, right?
Agreed.
So yeah, it's gonna be fun. But unless this thing does a major U-turn, I flip my opinion and think that they'll be in search for a quarterback this offseason.
Great stuff, Chip Scoggins. Thanks much. We will talk to you in a couple of weeks. Okay.
All right, boys.
See ya.